At my father's retirement dinner, the room froze. The moment Aunt Rachel dropped a newspaper on the table. Minutes earlier, my sister Brianna had laughed, telling her influencer friends I fixed Wi-Fi for a living. But the headline exposed everything: my company, my valuation, my name in bold black ink. Her smile cracked. My father's jaw locked. And that same night, someone used personal family details to try stealing 6 figures from my business. But what they didn't know was, before I go on, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you. Because what happened next didn't just expose my family, it exposed everything I spent my whole life trying to swallow. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood where every lawn was trimmed the same way, and every family pretended they were happier than they really were. Ours looked perfect from the outside too, Dad in his press shirts, Mom with her soft smile, me and Brianna. Spaced just right for the Christmas cards, but behind the front door the balance was never equal. And I learned that long before anyone bothered to explain it. My first clear memory of unfairness was Christmas morning when I was 7. The living room glowed with warm lights, the smell of cinnamon candles thick in the air. I tore open my only present, a pair of gray socks. Meanwhile, Brianna ripped the wrapping off a Barbie dream house twice her size, my parents cheering like she'd won the lottery. Dad filmed her on the camcorder. At one point, I stepped into the frame, holding up the socks, and he said, "Ethan, move a bit, sweetheart. Don't block the house." I didn't know it then, but that moment would matter later. Then came the vase, Mom's favorite from their honeymoon. Brianna, 5 years old and dramatic as always, knocked it over. Before the glass even hit the floor, she started sobbing huge, loud crocodile tears. Dad ran in, saw me standing closest, and snapped, "Ethan, what did you do?" She peeked at me through her fingers, not a single real tear in her eyes. I whispered, "It wasn't me, but it didn't matter. I was already guilty." While cleaning up the shards, I slipped and hit my eyebrow on the table edge, that tiny scar. It's still there. Back then, I didn't realize how many times I'd take the fall to keep the peace. It only got clearer with age. When Brianna was 12, my parents sent her to an art camp in Paris. She came home with sketchbooks and stories about bakeries and river walks. That same summer, I was dropped off at Uncle Rick's place to watch his sick bulldog while he gambled in Vegas. The whole house smelled like beer and old carpet. At night, the dog snored so loudly the windows shook. I spent those weeks hunched over Rick's ancient desktop, teaching myself basic coding. I tried telling myself I didn't care. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. By 16, the pattern was impossible to ignore. On my birthday, Dad handed me a mop and told me I'd be working at his friend's hardware store. Builds character, he said. Brianna, same year, same household, got the keys to a used Audi. Mom cried, taking photos as she drove it around the block. No one even took a picture of me. I didn't know it then, but resentment builds, like architecture, quiet beams, silent walls, foundations no one sees until it's too late. Thanksgiving that year sealed it. I'd won second place at a regional science fair. My project sat on the dining room floor, still wrapped in poster board. Mom never asked about it. Dad didn't even glance at it. But when Brianna casually mentioned she was thinking about starting a YouTube channel, the whole room lit up. Aunt Lisa asked for the channel name just so she could subscribe, even though it didn't exist yet. I chewed my turkey, pretending it didn't sting. But the dryness in my throat wasn't from the food. I didn't realize it then, but every ignored moment, every quiet disappointment, every time they treated me like the stable one who didn't need anything, it was all stacking up inside me, and it would come back later in ways none of us expected. After graduation, life didn't get easier. It just got quieter. I moved into a tiny loft above a coffee shop in the Arts District. The place shook whenever the espresso machine hissed downstairs, and every morning the smell of burnt beans drifted through the vents. The pipes rattled at night like someone was knocking from inside the walls, but it was mine. My first space, where nobody compared me to Brianna. I filled it with the only things that made sense to me: whiteboards, sticky notes, and the blue light from my secondhand monitor. That loft saw the first real version of Nexus Flow long before anyone knew the name, long before I knew what it would become. My parents rarely asked about it. Dad would glance up from his phone and say, "You still doing the computer thing?" "Yeah," I'd answer. He'd nod, already scrolling through Brianna's newest post. Mom wasn't better. She sent me Brianna's thumbnails with captions like, "Look how creative your sister is," as if I'd forgotten her entire life revolved around being seen. I kept my head down. I didn't brag, didn't post, didn't share milestones. Not because I was humble, because I was scared. Scared that if they knew what I was building, they'd dismiss it the same way they dismissed everything else. There was one Thanksgiving I'll never forget. I came home early to help cook. The kitchen was warm, fogged with butter steam and the smell of sage. Brianna strutted in full makeup, filming a holiday prep vlog on her phone. Mom handed her the carving knife. "Your hands are so delicate," she said. Then Brianna brushed past me, knocking my plate off the counter. It shattered. Mom didn't even look at her. She sighed at me. "Ethan, can't you be more careful?" Something in my chest tightened, not sharp, just heavy. I didn't know it then, but that moment predicted everything that came later. By 26, Nexus Flow finally took off. We got our first angel investor, then a second. Suddenly, I wasn't just a quiet coder. I was hiring employees, negotiating contracts, filing patents, but I kept it silent. I built in the dark because silence felt safer than the spotlight they gave Brianna. Then came the Christmas that changed everything. My company had just crossed $1 million in revenue. I flew home snow dusting the streets like powdered sugar. For the first time in years, I thought maybe they would ask. Maybe they'd notice. Brianna opened the door, holding keys to her new condo. "Downtown," she said proudly, "fully furnished." Mom and Dad got it for me. They hugged her, toasted her with wine, took pictures. Then Mom glanced at me. "You're doing okay on your own, right?" Not congratulations, not we're proud of you. Just that? I smiled, told her yeah, and swallowed the last piece of hope I didn't even want to admit I had. Around this time, Noah and I drifted into different cities, but he always called. I'd be pacing my loft at 1 a.m. screens lighting the walls, and he'd ask, "You ever going to tell them what you've built?" I always answered the same way. What's the point? I didn't know it then, but I was standing on the edge of the breaking point, and the next time we all sat at a dinner table, the fracture would finally split. The night of my father's first retirement dinner didn't feel like family. It felt like a stage Brianna had already claimed. When I walked into the banquet hall, the chandeliers were so bright they made every wine glass glow like it had something to brag about. Brianna twirled in the courtyard in front of her influencer friends, her champagne dress catching every flash of their phones. She looked like someone who expected applause just for breathing. When she spotted me, she squealed loud enough for the jazz trio to hear. "You actually came," she said, looping her arm through mine like she owned the moment. Then she turned to her friends. "This is my brother. He fixes Wi-Fi or whatever." They laughed at the same time, perfectly synced like it was rehearsed. I didn't react. I'd learned a long time ago that reacting only made things worse. At the dinner table, Dad bragged about Brianna's skincare sponsorships as if she'd discovered a cure for cancer. Mom chimed in with stories about brand trips, engagement rates, photo shoots. Meanwhile, I sat there slicing my steak while people asked what I did, and every time I opened my mouth, Brianna cut in. "He's techie, geek stuff. I don't even get it." I wasn't angry, not yet, just numb. Then Aunt Rachel reached into her bag. She pulled out a folded newspaper, thin, crisp edges. Like she had been waiting to reveal it at the perfect moment, she placed it on the table. The headline stared up at us. Local CEO Ethan Ward's startup passes 8-figure valuation, silence across the entire table. Dad blinked, like the print might change if he stared long enough. Mom froze her fork suspended in midair. Brianna's face drained of color, then flooded back in red. One of her friends whispered, "Wait, he's a CEO." Everything shifted, not in my favor, just away from her. We didn't speak for the rest of the dinner. The room got louder. The air got heavier. My chest felt like it was filling with static. The next morning, the messages came. "Mom, your sister didn't sleep. She's very upset. Dad, you should have told us. This feels like betrayal. Brianna, you humiliated me. I hope you're happy." Happy I sat in my loft with the blinds half open, watching dust float in the sunlight. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel anything. 2 nights later, I heard pounding on the glass downstairs, hard, frantic, like someone desperate. I muted my Zoom call and looked outside. Brianna, full glam, Designer heels, rage. I buzzed her in. She stormed up the stairs, her perfume hitting the air before she did. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped. I crossed my arms. "Come in." "You planned it," she said. "You let me introduce you like some loser. You embarrassed me." "I didn't write the article," I said. "You didn't deny it." She shot back. "Why should I?" She froze. Then quieter, sharper. "You're not that guy, Ethan. You're not special. You're just you." Something inside me, some old bruised part, flinched. "Yeah," I said. "And what does that make you?" Her eyes sharpened like broken glass. She spun around and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. 2 hours later, Mom called. "Ethan, your sister is devastated," she started. "Of course she is. You hurt her?" "She's been hurting me for years," I said. Mom inhaled sharply. "Don't twist this. You're stronger. She's emotional." There it was again, the family script. I disconnected the call. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from something older, deeper, finally waking up. I tried to sleep that night. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying Brianna's words, my mother's tone, every moment I'd swallowed through my childhood. By morning, the shaking had stopped. Something else settled in its place, something cold and steady. I didn't know it then, but I had just crossed the line I could never uncross. The fallout didn't hit all at once. It came in quiet waves, small at first, then violent. 3 days after Brianna stormed out of my loft, Harper asked me to step into the conference room. The glass walls reflected the morning light in sharp angles, and her expression told me this wasn't about deadlines. "We have a situation," she said, sliding her laptop toward me. On the screen was my email, except it wasn't. Someone had spoofed my address and sent a high-value invoice to one of our biggest partners, instructing them to wire funds to a new account. The only reason it didn't go through was because the partner noticed the tone felt off. "Look at the details," Harper said, "the phrasing, the timing. Whoever did this knew internal stuff you don't put in emails." My stomach tightened. Where'd it come from? She hesitated. "We traced the IP." I braced myself. It originated from Brianna Ward's building. For a moment, the room went silent except for the faint hum of the servers downstairs. I swallowed, but the dryness stuck. "It could be a neighbor," I said. The words felt weak coming out of my mouth. "It could be—" "It wasn't random," Harper said. "This was personal." I thanked her and walked out, but my legs felt heavy, like every step was dragging up years of things I'd buried. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands were shaking again, the same way they had when Brianna laughed in my face at the dinner table. That night, I drove to her condo. When she opened the door, her expression flickered guilt, then annoyance, then something like resignation. "What now?" she said, leaning against the doorframe in a silk robe. "We traced the email," I said. Her jaw twitched. "So, you know what that means." She looked away for a second, barely a second, but it was enough. Enough to confirm what I didn't want to believe. "You humiliated me," she said, voice rising. "You let everyone see you like this big shot, and you let them look at me like I was nothing. This isn't about that dinner," I said. "This is fraud. This is illegal. You think I care." She snapped. "You think I care about your stupid company? You think I care about anything except how you made me look." There it was, the core of her universe, reflection, perception, attention. "I didn't make you look small," I said quietly. "You did." Her lips tightened. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. For the first time, Brianna was speechless. "We're done," I said. "Whatever relationship we had, it's over. Don't call me again." And I left her standing in her doorway, her ego cracking like glass behind me. My parents called the next morning. Dad's voice was stern, clipped, as if I were an employee who'd messed up a report. "Your sister told us you threatened her." "That's not what happened," I said. "She's upset," he continued. "She made a mistake. She tried to steal from me," I said flatly. He sighed. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." My jaw clenched. "Dad," she crossed a line. "She's family," he said. "She needs support, not punishment." I asked, "Do I get support?" A pause. "You're strong," he said. "You always have been." There it was again, the family script. Brianna needed protecting. I needed nothing. I ended the call without another word. That night I couldn't stay in my loft. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. So I booked a flight to Oregon, the one place that had never felt heavy. Noah opened the door before I even knocked. "You look like hell," he said. "Come in." He didn't ask questions that first night. He never had to. But on the third night, sitting by the fire pit behind his house, I finally told him everything: the article, the fight, the fake invoice, the call with Dad. When I finished, he tossed another log onto the fire. "You know what this is, right?" he said. "What? You've spent your whole life waiting for applause from people who never learned how to clap." The flames crackled. My chest tightened. I didn't answer because he was right. And sitting under that cold Oregon sky, I realized something: I wasn't waiting anymore. What came next wouldn't be emotional. It wouldn't be loud. It would be strategic. And for the first time in my life, I felt steady. The second retirement gala didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a test of who would break first. The country club was all marble gold accents and quiet money. Every chandelier looked like it cost more than my first apartment. Guests drifted around with champagne flutes, laughing politely, unaware they were standing on the fault line, running straight through my family. I walked in wearing the same navy suit from the first dinner. But this time I didn't blend in. Heads turned. A few people whispered, pointing subtly in my direction. My phone buzzed nonstop notifications from the business article that dropped that morning. Local CEO Ethan Ward launches $50,000 tech grant for underprivileged students. My name was everywhere. And Atlas Manufacturing. My father's company was in every room where that headline was being discussed. A man in a gray suit intercepted me before I reached the bar. "You're Ethan, right, Nexus Flow?" I nodded. "My nephew applied for your grant. Brilliant move, son." He shook my hand like I'd done something noble, like I was someone to be proud of. I felt my father's eyes on me from across the ballroom before I even saw him. When I finally turned, he was staring, shoulders stiff, smile, thin eyes calculating. Mom stood beside him, trying to make her expression fit the moment, but failing. And Brianna, her face said everything: jealousy, panic, confusion. The same cocktail of emotions. She felt the night Aunt Rachel exposed the truth. The event coordinator stepped onto the stage and tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats." People settled silverware, clinked chairs, scraped softly against the floor. Tonight, she began, "We honor Thomas Ward for 30 years at Atlas Manufacturing." Polite applause. Dad smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "And of course, we welcome his children. First, Brianna Ward, a digital branding specialist and creator." The clapping was warm, scattered, obliging. Then she turned, slightly smiling wider. "And we're especially proud to have Ethan Ward with us, founder and CEO of Nexus Flow, whose recent education initiative has gained statewide attention." The applause that followed was louder, sharper, real. It rolled through the room like a wave. I saw Dad blink hard. I saw Mom's throat tighten, and Brianna, she froze. Her fork hovered above her plate, hand trembling just enough to betray her. When the applause finally faded, I excused myself and walked toward the bar. I needed a minute to breathe. Brianna followed. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks, sharp, angry, relentless. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" she hissed. "To make me look useless." I didn't even look at her. "This is what I built, not what I took." "You think you're better than me now," she whispered. "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped pretending you were better than me." Her face cracked like a mask, breaking down the middle. My father approached next. "Ethan," he said quietly, "you blindsided us. You could have told us." "I tried," I replied. "You never listened." His jaw tightened. A muscle in his cheek twitched. "I don't want this family falling apart." "It already did," I said. For a moment, the three of us stood there, Brianna shaking Dad, swallowing his pride, me breathing easier than I had in years. And then it hit me. For the first time, they weren't looking at me like the quiet, forgettable son. They were looking at me like a threat. Something cold settled deep inside me, something steady. Because they had no idea what was coming next, and I wasn't about to warn them. After the gala, the city felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you realize noise wasn't the problem. It was the people making it. I drove home with the windows cracked just enough for the cold air to sting. My phone kept lighting up with messages, investors congratulating me, reporters asking for interviews, strangers thanking me for the grant. But none of that mattered, because the applause that night didn't just shift the spotlight, it shifted the power. And Atlas Manufacturing, the company my father spent his life guarding, wasn't built to survive a shift. The next morning, Harper was already waiting in the conference room. Sunlight cut across the glass table in sharp lines. She didn't bother sitting. "You need to see this," she said, sliding a stack of printed emails toward me. Two major vendors, both long-term partners of Atlas, had contacted Nexus Flow overnight. They wanted demos, integration timelines, pricing. They're jumping ship, Harper said. Whatever happened at that gala, it rattled people. I flipped through the papers. Complaints Atlas had ignored for years, delayed payments, outdated systems, a merger in limbo because their infrastructure couldn't keep up. All the things Dad insisted were fine. "Roll out the free dashboard tier," I said today. Harper raised an eyebrow. "For their whole sector, for anyone who's tired of waiting on Atlas to catch up." She nodded. A slow, knowing smile. That afternoon, while the city hummed outside my window, I watched our servers spike as vendors signed up one after another. The ecosystem Atlas relied on was shifting, slipping, moving toward us like gravity had changed direction. I thought about Dad's face at the gala, how small he looked when the applause wasn't for him, how fragile the legacy he worshipped suddenly felt. "They think I'm reacting," I murmured. "They think this is about family drama." But it wasn't. It was about ending a cycle. About no longer being the son who swallowed everything, including the cost of their choices. I leaned back, feeling the calm settle in my bones. "They still believe I'm playing defense," I said softly, but I wasn't. I was already 3 moves ahead, and the weapon, they didn't see the one they handed me, without realizing was simple. Every system Atlas refused to fix. I built something better. And this was only the beginning. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Because stories like this don't end in one night or one dinner or one moment of truth. They unfold in the quiet places, behind closed doors, inside old wounds, in the silence after someone finally stops pretending. And if you've ever swallowed your worth just to keep the peace, you don't have to do that here. Stay with me. There's more to tell. This story isn't over.